Jake woke up before the sun rose. He had always been an early bird, but this time his heart was not beating as calmly as usual. March 8th, a day he had been waiting for all year. This was not just a holiday. It was his chance to show Lilia how much he loved her, how much she meant to him. He wanted to make this day special for her, unforgettable, filled with emotions, warmth, and surprises. He woke up with a clear purpose: to give her the best surprise. Jake wasn't just making breakfast for Lilia, he wanted to prepare a whole range of gifts. His plans were to build a day filled with romance and care. He adored her smile, her happy eyes when she received gifts. It was these little things that made their relationship so warm and real. So, quietly sneaking into the kitchen, he began preparing breakfast. Pancakes with fruit and honey, a cup of her favorite tea, just what she always loved. He did everything to create an atmosphere of comfort and tenderness. At the same time, he had prepared a box of gifts for Lilia, among which were two new serious rings, a small symbol of their connection that he wanted to give her. This moment was very important to him. He was eagerly waiting for her to wake up and see all of this. He was curious about what reaction she would have and how she would respond to the surprise. He dreamed that this day would be special for both of them. All the dishes were ready, and Jake went into the bedroom, holding the breakfast in his hands. Lilia was still asleep, her long hair spread out on the pillow, and her breathing was calm and steady. Jake knelt next to her bed, carefully placed the tray with food on the table, and gently touched her shoulder. "Lily, wake up," he said softly, smiling. Lilia slowly opened her eyes. At first, she couldn't understand what was happening, but when she saw the breakfast, her eyes lit up and she smiled. However, this smile wasn't the usual one. It was slightly forced, and Jake immediately noticed it. "Hi," Lilia said with a soft, slightly trembling voice, and sitting up in bed, she slowly rubbed her eyes. There was no energy in her gaze, no spark that she usually radiated. Jake felt that something was wrong, but he didn't want to disturb her right away. It was a holiday after all, and he decided not to focus on the little things. After all, he wanted this day to be wonderful. "You look beautiful," he said, trying to keep the atmosphere light. "I made breakfast. I hope you'll like it." Lilia looked at him, but something in her eyes didn't match what he was used to seeing. Instead of the usual spark of joy, there was a shadow of something else, a hidden disappointment. This made Jake uneasy, but he tried to ignore it. After all, today was a special day. "You've really put in a lot of effort," she said, trying to smile, but her words sounded mechanical. "You don't look quite like yourself," Jake remarked, sitting next to her on the bed, putting his arm under her neck. He saw that something was bothering Lilia, and he couldn't ignore it anymore. She was silent for a long time, and Jake began to feel more and more uncomfortable. Finally, she took a deep breath as if gathering all her strength to say something important. When she said, "Jake, I cheated on you," his heart stopped. These words hit like thunder on a clear day. Suddenly, the entire reality seemed to crumble, and he couldn't understand what this meant. How could this happen? They had been together for more than 2 years, and Jake believed their bond was strong. How had he not noticed that something was wrong? "What did you say?" He could barely say. His voice was numb from the shock. He couldn't believe it. All the moments when they laughed together, dreamed of the future. All of it now seemed like a lie. Was everything just a lie? Was he really this blind? Lilia started crying. She couldn't speak. Her voice was breaking, and she fell silent again. Jake clenched his fists, and his heart was breaking with pain. He couldn't understand why this had happened, why it had come to this. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, trying to calm herself down. "It was so unexpected. Just a few weeks ago when I was at work, he started paying attention to me. At first it seemed like just ordinary communication, but then—" Her words trailed off, but Jake heard how hard it was for her to say this. "How could you?" he asked in pain. He couldn't understand why she stayed silent, why she hadn't told him earlier. If there were problems in their relationship, why didn't she talk about it? "I was scared," Lilia said, her eyes filled with tears. I was scared of losing you. I was scared you wouldn't understand me. I didn't feel good enough for you. Jake felt his soul tearing apart. All the plans for the future they had built together, all the dreams of a shared life. It all turned out to be an illusion. Now he didn't know what to do. Could he forgive her? Meanwhile, someone knocked on the door. It was Mike, their mutual friend, who always came to Jake when he was going through difficult times. Seeing both of them, Mike understood what had happened, and his expression became very serious. Seriously? He asked, looking at Lilia. She cheated on me, Jake could only say, his voice dead and hopeless. Mike, looking at Lilia, asked, Don't you understand what you've done? He could feel Jake's pain and anger for the one who betrayed him. I don't know what to do, Jake said. It hurts. How can I forgive such a betrayal? Mike walked up to him, put his hand on his shoulder, and said, You need to do what you feel, Jake. Don't let her manipulate your feelings. You deserve happiness. Jake sat in silence. His heart was torn apart, but he realized that Mike was right. He couldn't leave this unanswered. I can't be with you anymore, he said, looking into Lilia's eyes, who was crying in front of him. I can't look at you and know that you cheated on me. Lilia fell to her knees, her tears never stopping. She knew she had lost him, and that was the worst thing that could have happened. It hurts so much, Jake quietly added, trying to hold back his emotions. He collected himself and, without saying another word, left the apartment. He knew he couldn't go back to her. His heart was heavy, but he knew it was the right decision. Mike supported him as they walked together. Jake didn't know what would happen next, but he realized that a new path was opening up before him. To heal, he had to move forward. It was a painful moment, but he understood that he had a chance for a new life. And although it was hard, he was ready to move on. Mike, seeing how hard it was for Jake to deal with everything that had happened, decided that he needed to take a break. He knew leaving his friend in that state at home wasn't an option, so he came up with something that could at least temporarily distract him from the pain. Listen, Jake, Mike said as they sat on the couch in his apartment, Jake quietly drinking beer. Maybe it's time for a change of scenery? How about going to a club? I know you're hurting right now, but sometimes a change of surroundings helps, even if just for a little while. Jake looked at him, thinking for a moment. His heart was broken, but at that moment he really needed something to take his mind off the whole situation with Lilia. And although the club wasn't his usual scene, he agreed. He didn't know what it would bring, but he just wanted to forget what had happened, even for a few hours. All right, let's go, he replied quietly, trying to sound confident. But only if you promise we won't stay long. Mike grinned widely. I promise. We'll just relax a bit, that's all. They got dressed, left the apartment, and headed to one of the most popular clubs in the city. When they arrived, the atmosphere was completely different. The music, the lights, the people, everything created a sense of detachment from reality, and Jake, though not thrilled about being in such a place, began to feel the tension lifting from his shoulders a bit. Mike immediately started joking, trying to cheer his friend up. Look, here's a new start for you. No more Lilia, only new opportunities. Jake laughed, although it sounded more like a forced reaction than genuine amusement. They walked up to the bar, ordered beers, and Mike started introducing him to a few girls sitting nearby. Jake was absent. His thoughts were far away, but he tried not to dwell on it. He was trying to stay in the moment, and even though it was hard, he still gave this new situation a chance. Why not try to have a little fun? Mike suggested, nudging him toward a group of people on the dance floor. Jake refused to dance, but still stayed close, watching how people were enjoying themselves. After a while, Mike noticed Jake seemed a little more relaxed, though his serious expression hadn't changed. At one point, Mike asked, Have you ever tried to just forget everything, even for a few minutes? Jake nodded. Sometimes you need to, or you'll lose your mind. But just then, as they were heading back to the bar, Jake spotted a familiar face in the crowd. His heart stopped. Lilia? She was standing at the bar, and it seemed like she didn't even notice him. Jake hesitated. What was she doing here? How could she be here after everything that had happened between them? He tried to look away, but unexpectedly his gaze met Lilia's, and in that moment he realized her look was different from usual. There was no sadness or remorse in her eyes, just lightness and even something resembling joy. But that wasn't all. She was standing there, kissing the bartender. Jake couldn't believe his eyes. It was a real punch to the gut. She was with him, hugging him, kissing him as if they had been together for a long time. It was so unexpected that he didn't know how to react at first. Shit, Mike whispered, seeing this. Jake stood frozen, just watching them. He felt his heart breaking again, but this time, even more intensely. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Lilia, his girl, his love, kissing another man. And this was happening right there, in front of him. Jake, Mike said quietly, seeing his friend start to lose control. You can't let yourself see this. Let's get out of here. But Jake stood there, watching as Lilia continued her conversation with the bartender. She didn't notice that her ex-boyfriend was standing there, and his heart was shattering into pieces. I don't care about this anymore, he said quietly, trying to calm himself. I don't want to see her. I don't want any of this. You've made the right choice, Jake, Mike replied, grabbing him by the shoulder and leading him toward the exit. You deserve more. You deserve to be happy. They walked out onto the street and Jake felt the cold air touch his face. The music, the lights, and even the crowd behind them became distant, like some far-off noise. He felt empty, but maybe it was necessary to realize that he didn't need to hold on to the past. I don't know how to get through this, Jake whispered, walking beside Mike. Mike placed his hand on his shoulder again. You don't have to do it all on your own. All this stuff with Lilia, it's just a part of your story, not the whole story of your life. You deserve more. Jake looked at his friend, and although it was hard for him, he understood that he needed to move forward. Maybe this club, this moment, helped him realize one important thing. The most important decisions lie ahead.